Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Okay, so welcome to this first episode of the Helping People Perform podcast. In my first episode, I couldn't go without inviting my good friend, longtime colleague, and just saying before the show here, we've known each other for pretty much 25 years and on and off. And we've got back together recently and even got to do a bit of work together, which is fantastic. So today I'll be talking to Faris Aranki, the CEO and founder of Shia Ghetto Consulting. We're going to hear all about his fascinating story. We're going to hear about strategy and emotional intelligence, facilitation, helping others, and the success equation, EQ, IQ, and FQ. So some really interesting stuff to find out about. So welcome, Faris. Great to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me, Paul. I am so excited beyond words to be your first guest. If for any reason in the edit I become your 10th guest, I'm really pleased to be your 10th guest. No, I'm really pleased to be with you. And as you said, we're all friends, but it's always nice to chat with you.
Fantastic, good stuff. And yeah, one of the key reasons I wanted you on as the first guest as well, Faris, was whenever I want to help myself perform, I turn to certain people, and you're very much top of the list in terms of where I go to for that inspiration and help as well. So great to have you here. We're going to hear a lot about what you do now and how you help others perform, but I just want to get a bit of background. What have you done in your past? What's got you to where you are today?
Luck, spit, blood, trading. No, let me take you back to where I started my career, pretty much, and it was coming out of university where I actually met you, Paul.
Yeah.
And I then decided I was didn't fancy proper work, and became a school teacher. And I say became a school teacher, I didn't actually have a teaching qualification. I just sort of got a reference, got a job in a school, and then began 5 years of teaching, which in my degree, I taught maths and economics. So no finer place to start and sort of learn all the intricacies of the working world and sort of working with people than in a school where kids give you the best feedback ever and the toughest feedback. So yeah, 5 years as a school teacher. Then I sort of made the transition to the business world, actually, where I started again and joined an energy company here in the UK. And I sort of worked my way around the energy company, learned all about the energy industry, and ended up in their strategy team, which is where I discovered I loved solving complex problems. I love strategy. And I then made a transition into strategy consulting for a range of big strategy consulting firms. I worked across a few like EY and Carney and FTI Consulting. But anyway, I worked 12 years in that environment, solving complex problems for people. Very much enjoying that, but clearly not enjoying it enough, because 3 years ago I decided to set up my own firm to work on a specific type of consulting, which we'll probably explore. So I won't give away too much of the story, but I decided I can do it. I can do it on my own. So I set up my own consulting firm called Shia Ghetto Consulting, which is what you referenced is where I work now and continue to do good stuff.
Fascinating. So you've been a teacher, you've been in consulting, you've done all sorts. I know you've worked abroad as well, haven't you? A couple of places.
I have. Certainly, it started with the teaching experience. I lived in Latin America, I lived in Southern Asia, I lived in the Middle East, and that continued in my consulting career. I took secondments out into Spain and was based up in Scotland, if we consider that abroad. I don't know. But yeah, I have had the pleasure also as a consultant. You work all around the world, so I think a big part of it is experiencing other cultures, and that's certainly helped me in what I do today.
Yeah. Fantastic. And would you consider, what would you consider out of those early days, in particular, those teaching days, about what were your key lessons about how you help people to be at their best? Because that's what a teacher's all about, isn't it? Getting people to be at their best.
Yeah, and this is my big shout out to teachers, massively underpaid, massively undervalued, because the skills they have are beyond compare, and are paramount for all types of business and getting people to perform to their best. And it always made me laugh that when I transitioned between teaching and business couldn't see these skills. So what did it teach me? Right? If you imagine the hardest group of individuals, it's often kids. They at least in the business world, people pretend they want to improve and they want stuff. But I was teaching two glamorous subjects. One was maths and one was economics. Now, economics was great because it was to older kids and it was usually for kids who'd opted in. So
Right.
they actually wanted to learn. Whereas the other end of the spectrum was maths. Now, every child had to learn maths whether they wanted to or not. And you can imagine an 11-year-old who doesn't want to learn maths. They're a really tough audience. And unbeknownst to me, what it really helped sharpen in me was the ability to engage with that 11-year-old. And I learned that the secrets were about keeping things simple, because the more it was complicated, the harder it was for them to engage with, and keeping it fun. Right? And these are two key principles that I apply when working with people to get the best out of them. It doesn't matter if you're 11 or you're 65, right? If you can keep it simple and fun, you're more likely to get the best out of somebody.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I've never gone into the teaching vocation myself. Both the parents were teachers, and I always said I'd never be a teacher. And I think my career has basically been a teacher by proxy in a lot of cases. But yeah, I mean, that respect for teachers and what they do, and the fact that you do have such a wide group of people, particularly in those non-opt-in subjects that have to be there and are forced to be there. I've seen some parallels in my time in the consulting days and the helping days, where actually having a group of people in a room that don't want to be there, how do you deal with that? That's a core skill that is really built in. And if you want to help people, you've got to engage them. You've got to make it fun. Fantastic stuff. Great stuff. So you started to talk about there the Sheer Ghetto. So
Yeah.
I know you started Sheer Ghetto at an ideal time for any young business. Tell us about that.
Yeah, you know me, Paul. I love a challenge. I thought, yeah, starting a business is not hard enough. What I'm going to do is start one and then sit back and watch a global pandemic decimate it. So yeah, I started 6 months before COVID, and what an experience that was, right? The analogy I often give is back in the day when I wanted to learn tennis as a kid, and I said to my dad, I want to learn tennis, and he said, "Yeah, sure, son, I fully support you. Why don't you use my old racket, which was an old wooden racket from the '60s?" And I said, "Well, Dad, time's moved on. All the kids are using sort of graphite rackets and this." And he said, "Look, if you can learn to play with the wooden racket, son, just imagine when I do finally buy you a graphite one, how great you'll be." Now, I think that's exactly the same with if you can start a business during a pandemic, then just think after a pandemic how great you will be as a business owner. So, yeah, 6 months before COVID, I'd love to say it was really a big thing. It was barely a newborn, and then it got buried by COVID. So I started the business again a year later, once things had settled. And so, depending on the birth certificate, Shigeto is either 3 years old or 2 years old.
Fantastic. Well, I know you're doing some great work, and so I know when I look at your website, when I look at all your materials, you've got this success equation: EQ, IQ, FQ seems to be core to what you're doing. So tell us a bit more about who you help and how you help them, and where does that success equation come in?
Yeah, I mean, literally, I help everybody, but that sounds way too broad. But let's talk about the equation. Let's talk about how I like to help people. And fundamentally, my 12 years as a strategy consultant taught me that there is solving a problem is one thing, and we solve some very complex problems in that time. And that's the IQ part. Are you bringing your best knowledge, your best ideas, your best level of creativity to solving that problem? Okay. And a lot of companies are, but not every company is, right? Because
Yeah.
you might have very smart people, but maybe you're not listening to all of them in the right way. Maybe you're not. So there are even when you do have good IQ, there's ways to raise that level of creativity. So that's one aspect that we help in, but that's usually not the biggest challenge, right? As I said, solving the problem is half the battle. Right, is maybe even only a third of the battle. Then getting people to buy in to your solution is the big crux, and that's where you need this EQ. Because you can have a great idea, if nobody else believes in it or understands it or pays it any attention, then it's just a piece of paper, which is, and I've written a lot of very expensive paperweights, as I call it. Clever reports that have never seen the light of day because of human problems. So that's where you need the EQ, and that's where certainly Shigeto helps. And we focus a lot of our efforts. Are you talking to people in the way they want to be talked to? Are you making it as simple as possible? Are you sort of being sympathetic to what's going on in their life and empathetic? So,
And
so
what
that's the EQ.
and just for those people who aren't necessarily familiar with EQ, so
Yeah.
IQ's a fairly commonly known intelligence quota sort of piece. So EQ might be new for some people. What's EQ?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, emotional quotient it's sort of I'd say modern, but it's been around this term for a good 30 years, as sort of initially introduced by a chap called Daniel Goleman. But fundamentally, what it talks about is in a person's ability to connect with others.
Right.
If you think about, in every group of friends, there's that one friend who just seems to get on with everyone, can really sense the mood of the room, mood of others, and know the right things to say. That in one aspect is what emotional intelligence is about, but it's also about knowing yourself, right? It's being able to control your emotions, sense the emotions in others, and sort of get the best out of both yourself and others, effectively. So yeah, you need to bring EQ into the business world, because otherwise, as I said, ideas will just stay as ideas. Teams will stay as individuals rather than teams. And so yeah, we help with that. And then the last bit, which is this FQ, and you're going to probably ask me, as the good host you are, there'll be a lot of people who've never heard of FQ. It sounds a little bit rude.
I've heard similar in my time, Faris.
I'm sure I shouted FQ at you 25 years ago.
I'm sure you have.
But FQ is a lesser known element, a focus quotient. It's not officially been signed off by anyone. I'd love to listen to a podcast in 30 years' time when someone says, well, it was introduced by Faris Aranki in the 2020s. But yeah, I'm sure it's been around. But it's something I'd identified. I was looking for the missing ingredient, because I knew you can have good ideas, you can get everyone bought in, but still companies were failing.
Right.
And I realized it was this ability to focus, to actually deliver on those ideas, that was super important. It could be the margin between success and failure. So we often help companies and individuals improve their focus. Now, that could mean, are you working on the right things? Are you giving it as much attention as it is? But it could also mean, are there some barriers you're not seeing in your way that if you remove them, you'd be even more impactful? Right. So that's the FQ side of things that Shigeto helps with.
Oh, fantastic. And so you work with companies, small, medium, large. What's your range?
So my range is small, medium, and large. It's I'd love to say as a strategist I had a strategy, but basically I just took any clients that I could. But where I am today actually is lovely, because it works across different industries. I have a bunch of big, giant corporate company clients in the mining sector, in the retail sector, in the energy sector that I work with, and they have one set of challenges. And then I work with a range of startups who have, and they're in healthcare, they're in tech, and they have a different set of challenges. And then the third group that I work with are professional services firms. So people want to improve their skills when dealing with their own clients. So certainly they do a lot more actual training as opposed to facilitation and problem solving in the other companies. So yeah, it's a really nice mix. And I was saying to somebody today, the great thing about that is I'm learning as much from those different groups as I'm helping them, so that I can then cross-pollinate those ideas and rock up to a big corporate and say, have you tried this? Because just seen it work amazingly in a much smaller company, and I think it would be really useful to you.
Yeah. And I've experienced the exact same thing myself. I've worked in so many different sectors and not necessarily specializing in any particular one. I don't know what your experience has been, but certainly from my area, it's been, you can pull in completely different points of view, different perspectives, collide those in and say, right, you're an oil and gas company. Here's how a healthcare company might think about this. here's how a small business startup thinks about these sorts of things. Does that spark any ideas? Is that what you find in your world as well?
Completely. I just spent earlier this week, I spent 2 days with a big mining company, a team in a mining company. And over dinner on the first night, somebody said to me, with all due respect, which is never, it always sends a shiver down my spine when someone starts it. He said, with all due respect, Faris, you know absolutely nothing about our industry, do you? And I went, not really. I'm not a mining specialist. He said, but what you did today was amazing because you understand people and you understood when somebody slipped into jargon and three people in the room weren't understanding. You were the only one who said, hang on a minute, I don't understand what you're talking about.
Right.
Wind up, and it just made the meeting flow a bit easier. So he said, I get it. I get the skills you're bringing. I get the ideas you were bringing, some great ideas that we'd never thought of in this industry. And yeah, I think that's immensely powerful. And anytime someone says you need to be a specialist in something, you do, but it doesn't have to be an industry.
Right. Yeah, and I think that in general, if we're thinking about this general topic of helping people perform and the people whose role it is and vocation it is to do that, it's certainly been a top tip of mine from the early stages as to be open and honest about where your expertise lies, and more importantly, where it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, so don't try and be that person that says, "Oh, I've read some Google reports off the back in preparation for this meeting. I know all about mining," and then you find yourself, let's say, proverbially in that digging yourself into a hole. So
yeah, definitely. And I certainly, I'd love to say I never did that, but I've certainly done that earlier on in my career. And yeah, you're right. The hole just keeps getting bigger.
Fantastic. Great stuff. And so another aspect that's you're helping people perform from a small business perspective as well, and you're sharing some of your insights and knowledge around small business. And some of you who are based in London, maybe even privileged enough to walk around and see Faris's face on some big billboards. So a man of many talents, a London fashion model as well. So tell us a bit about that and what that involves.
What, being a London fashion model?
Yeah.
Yeah, I often forget that I am a small business owner, and that is a real thing. And I guess what you're alluding to, Paul, it sharply came into my realization was my insurance company, my business insurance company, were looking for a small business owner to be in a real advert of theirs, and they chose me, and you gave me a platform to say, look, I'm a small business owner. They really help me. They take care of the insurance side of things so that I can run a business. Now, I often, when I tell the story, I say it was very fortuitous, but people rightly say, look, it kind of been just completely out of the blue, and it wasn't. It was about the EQ side of my business. It was about building and establishing a trusted relationship with them over a period of time. The actual story is I replied to an advert in their newsletter saying, do you want to be front up our campaign? Right. And I didn't get it. Right. But what did happen is created a line of communication with them that then grew and grew. Instead they gave me a small task. I completed it, built a level of sort of trust, and then they gave me a bigger task and then a bigger task until a point they said, we really like working with you. We're glad you hung around. How about next year you be the guy? We go for it. So immensely flattered, really great thing to do, a little bit of fun as well. And I can't say it doesn't help the business. So yeah, being a small business owner and getting on a billboard is no bad thing.
Fantastic. And that maybe brings us around a little bit to the next part of what I want to talk about, which is about how you get help to perform. Where do you go to? You've talked there about, reaching out as a small business and offering yourself in some ways and some of your insights and some of your stories. How do you get help to perform? Where do you go to? Who do you speak to? What's your angle for sharpening the blade of sheer ghetto?
Sharpening sheer ghetto. Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of threefold if I think about it. A big one is my own personal network, friends, family, to give emotional support, because I was going to say starting a business, running a small business is an emotional roller coaster, but any sort of professional career is an emotional. You have good days, you have bad days, and particularly when you're a small business owner, you don't to start with, you don't have a team, right? So you need people to help you when you things aren't going right, and equally when they are going right, when things have gone well, you want somebody to celebrate success with, but you also want somebody to commiserate and tell you um, it's not all bad. So friends and family are a massive part of helping me to perform. Then at the next level is I have a coach. I have my own coach, right? Just because I go in and help and advise companies doesn't mean I know everything, doesn't mean I don't need to be pushed. And I had a coach that helped me set up my company. I've recently re-engaged with a coach who helps me bounce ideas, challenges me, and make sure I'm on the right path. So that's a massive help to help me perform. And then the last one is one you know well, Paul, is actually I accidentally created a network of other small business owners and other freelancers.
Accidentally, yeah.
Yeah, accidentally. It was totally selfish because I was lacking a social group. I initially just found one or two people that I knew who were doing something vaguely similar. Started having coffees with them. The group grew. I put them together. We call ourselves the Solopreneurs Club. We meet once a month, but we have a WhatsApp group. We support each other. We give ideas. We go to work together. We share tips. And it has been immense, not just for me. I mean, selfishly, even if nobody else in the group got anything out of it, it's been great for me to help me perform. But just seeing how everyone is working together and hearing from them how much benefit they get from it um, is in fact a second loop of helping me perform because it gives me a warm fuzzy glow. So it's a combination of those things that keep me on the straight and narrow and get the best out of me.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I can personally attest to the value of the Solopreneurs Club. I've found it hugely valuable. And I think one of the great things and insights from my side or from what you've done to set that up is that you there are networks out there. You weren't finding the one that was quite right for you in some ways. And so you just made it happen, and you experimented, you tried, you pulled some things together. It might not work. I don't think we've got the same group of people that we started with. Some have haven't continued. Some have come in new, and we talk to each other. And I think there's a lot of value from that side of things when you're learning in any role. Is put yourself out there with people who are in a similar situation, maybe with a slightly colliding perspective, and that will really up your game. So, yeah.
I think there's and I wish I could attribute every quote I ever say to whoever actually said it. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right?
Yeah.
So make sure you've got the right 5 people or 10 people or whatever, and good things will happen.
Fantastic. And just thinking about it while you were saying there about how you get people, how you get help to perform. You talked a little bit about the coach and what I would consider your IQ of your game.
Yeah.
You talk about the EQ of your game, and then you talk about the FQ in terms of the focus and getting you in the right mindset and getting your head in the right space to move on. So just goes to show that success equation is relevant in every life, Solan, eh?
Again, I hope people quote it after listening to this podcast. I'll be collecting royalties off it, Paul, but no. And actually you're right, IQ, EQ, and actually having an equation, having a nice way to communicate whatever you want to talk, going back to the teaching thing in the most simple way, is immensely powerful. Now, I'd love to be able to say that the IQ, EQ, FQ equation came up on day one when I started my company. But the simple fact is it probably didn't come until about 18 months in after I'd spoken to about 200 people trying to desperately explain what it is I did.
Yeah.
This is not working. This is not working. It goes back to your test and learn idea. And so everybody out there, go find your own equation because mine's already taken. No, go find it and just communicate and be amazed at what good stuff happens.
Fantastic. Yeah, that simple model to sort of wrap everything that you do around can really help. And I've hit on my own as well as a good starting point, hopefully, and I'm sure I'll iterate and move on from there. So with your help, of course, that's what it's all about. And so just looking to ask you a couple of final questions just before we close out. So let's talk about your ideal world. You've got, who would you like to be helping? Who's your ideal client, ideal group of people, individuals? If you could sort of, click those fingers and the ideal client would be there, who is it that you would like to be helping to perform?
Well, I've never been a politics man, but number 10, if ever they were to call, give them a go. No, I think every business has its own challenges and would be great to work with, but it's where you can get the maximum impact and help those who might not be as it come to as naturally or have all the tools and resources available. So funnily enough, just this afternoon, I was having a coffee with a CEO of one of the charities that I'm connected to. And we were talking, we were basically talking about IQ, EQ, FQ, and that was so enjoyable because I know that every little bit of effectiveness and improvement performance for those guys will be as great as it is, having Amazon as a client as I do, but, working with a small charity, I think is much more enjoyable. But, my accountant will tell me I can't keep working free for small charities. So, so having a nice mix is of great benefit. But yeah, there's a lot of problems. I love the human race. I hate the human race because there's a lot of problems out there that would be great to help solve, but they've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And take your pick.
Awesome. And then flipping that on its head a little bit.
Yeah.
Who would you like to learn from? If you had the chance to have a face-to-face, I know you're a big fan of the face-to-face coffee meetings. You're often seen on the Boris bikes around London, flipping between a few of them.
Yeah.
Who would that ideal person or group of people be for you to learn from and to help you up your performance?
Oh, do you know what? I think I read a lot every day, so actually, I'd probably sort of avoid all the sort of high, prolific people, and it would have to be someone. I'm always drawn to. I can't even remember his name, but it'd be someone of the ilk of. There was a great book by the guy who used to be the kind of the butler in the White House.
Okay.
So where he got to see 10 different presidents.
Right. The guy had been there for so many years, he'd seen it
so
all,
many years, and he could tell you, look, the great thing from this guy, the great thing from this guy, and how did I blend in all the time and get that, tune in. So maybe the equivalent here in the UK would be Larry the cat at 10 Downing Street, and so a little bit flippant, but I think there's amazing people. Obviously, there are inspirational, above the line people. I think there's amazing people all around you that we often overlook and don't ask enough questions. So yeah. I think I could walk within a 5 minute radius of my house, and there'd probably be a good handful of inspirational people that I would very much enjoy learning from.
Fantastic. And I know you're not one to be afraid of chatting to anyone and learning from them as you go along. So fantastic. All right. So brilliant stuff, mate. We've learned about EQ, IQ, FQ. We've learned about Sheer Ghetto and some of the great ways that you help people perform. Finally, just to round off, how do we find out more? Where do we go to find out more about what you do, who you are? How do we connect?
Yeah, well, I'd love to carry on the conversation with absolutely everyone. So the best ways to connect and carry on that conversation are LinkedIn. Look me up, Faris Aranki. And otherwise, the Sheer Ghetto website, which Sheer Ghetto, for all those who can't see my branded coffee mug, are listening to this, is SHIAGETO.com.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure we put all of those details in, and I'll pop your link in and all the rest of it, mate. So it's all good. I'll do my bit as host.
You do your bit.
Fantastic. Well, as always, mate, an absolute pleasure, but even greater pleasure for you to help me set up and get this inaugural podcast underway. I know that you help me perform when it comes to my business. Hopefully we can reciprocate And thanks so much for being on today's show, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
The pleasure's all mine, and I really look forward to it. Right, here's to a successful podcast, everybody.
Cheers, Faris. See you soon, mate.
Cheers,
Bye.
Paul.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review, and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.